dreamers, a happy, scrappy group of believers. So come, play a part. There's room for mistakes and messes and art. Who cares if there's not many takers? We're doing it for the makers.
What's up, everybody? What words just came out of my mouth? Did you hear that?
What's up, everybody?
Oh, no.
Just right out of the gate.
Just really killing it right out of the gate. You guys, hi.
Welcome to the For the Makers podcast.
We are so glad that you are here. I am already loving this season. It's going to be so good.
Yeah.
I can't wait for you guys to hear it.
It's stacked.
It is. The list really is stacked.
Yeah.
You guys, I hope you know who we are by now. But if this is your first time listening to this podcast.
Gosh, I can't believe people don't know us.
I know, we're so famous. No. What I meant to say was, hi, my name is Leah Beth Etheridge. I'm one of your hosts, and I'm here with the one and only
Rachel Gifford.
Hey, girl.
Hey, girl.
How's it going?
Great. You know, you did something a little earlier, and it made me think of girl dinner.
What did I do?
I don't know. You just it was like the melody of how you said something, and I went, girl dinner.
That's become a fad right now, and I don't know.
Last night I totally had a girl dinner.
What'd you have for dinner?
I had I had apples and peanut butter and a chomp bar. And then I tried to soft boil eggs and I accidentally boiled them for 25 minutes. So they were hard boiled and I did not eat them. But it just felt anyway.
It's the epitome of girl dinner.
I'm so glad that ended up coming out at the beginning of this podcast. What are we doing?
I'll tell you what we're doing. We are here to interview an incredible friend and artist, and we're so excited for you guys to meet him. Rach, can you give a little reading of his bio for us?
Totally. Y'all, this is Michael Sanky. Michael Sanky is a comedian, writer, musician, and actor based in New York City. Michael has a background in improv, sketch, and character comedy from the Upright Citizens Brigade and the Groundlings. You can find him regularly performing in comedy venues across NYC, including on his solo show, Make the Cut, which he performed to packed and pleased audiences. Yes. He also created and hosts Spell Checc, a game show that's a spelling bee meets Try Not to Laugh challenge. I just laugh thinking about it. Outside of comedy, Michael is also an award-winning multi-instrumentalist, arranger, and musical director, playing venues including Carnegie Hall, Boston Symphony Hall, and Berklee Performance Center. Creatively, the medium isn't a constraint. Michael just loves using art to connect, comfort, and convict as the moment calls. Okay, that final sentence, beautiful, like poetry. Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Oh my gosh, we're so excited to have you. As we were setting up, maybe this is why I was feeling silly and brought up the boiled eggs, is because as we were setting up, Michael he's just one of those people that sounds comedic gems just randomly. And so we were laughing, just trying to get through our sound check here. Not our spell check, which I didn't get the joke at first. It's spelled CHECC.
Yeah, the two C's at the end.
Which is brilliant. And I go, is there a reason
that there are two C's at the end?
What's the gimmick there that a spelling show would have something spelled wrong?
Yeah, I'm confused. Oh boy. Michael, we know each other from, the three of us all know each other from The Hang. And we've brought The Hang up on the podcast a couple times before, but it's basically a Christian arts ministry here in New York. But you're from Long Island. Yeah. And now you're in New York.
The big city.
In the big city.
The windy city.
Wait, isn't that Chicago?
Yeah. Absolutely not New York.
Okay, so when did you know that you wanted to? I'm always curious about people who are close to New York City.
Oh, when did I want to?
Yeah, when were you I want to move to New York?
Yeah, so
from Long Island.
Yeah, I think it's always kind of in the zeitgeist of most people that weren't raised in a city to be like, oh, I want to leave this small town and live it up and travel and go to the big city and make it. And I think being on Long Island, this is probably also a cultural thing for like people in Westchester or upstate New York or even Jersey, where it's like, this is going to sound dark. It's not meant this way. Like, dying in New York is like you've made it. Like,
totally.
That's the arrival point, right?
Yeah.
And so, just coming from Long Island, I was like, okay, so I'll probably like hop around the East Coast, find my calling, whatever. And then I'll just like my end of my time will be spent in New York, in the big city, probably with some Wall Street guy being mad at me for getting those reports in too late. And then I pass. And that's it.
And then I die.
I haven't thought out the details. Probably for the better, but yeah.
That's awesome. I didn't know that about like just living in the surrounding areas. That's kind of like the mentality of, it's just like, that's the thing. Like that would be the ultimate. You know?
Well, I mean, and I think because a lot of people are what we affectionately call transplants, but it's like people who come from all over the country to be here. And I find it so interesting you said it in the way of like the goal is to die here, to live out your last days in New York, because as transplants, quote unquote, people are like, oh, I'm here for a season and then I'll leave and I'll go, live my life in the suburbs, or I'll go live my life somewhere else. Yeah. And so it is kind of, it's cool to me that it feels so like solid. Like the city feels very like, this is where I want to live my last days.
I definitely think always. Well, the weird thing first is that I thought that would always be like when I was like, oh, like in my 40s I'll probably move to New York, and then the rest of my time will be there, however long that is. And so it was weird like moving back to New York after like college and after work, to be here at like, I think I moved back in like at 23, 24, and I was like, oh, this is I have a lot more time than I expected here.
Right.
It's great, but it is interesting because I always was like, oh, if I have an LA thing, I maybe will spend a year in LA, or I'll maybe spend a year in Atlanta for a TV thing. But like, I was always like, okay, I'll come back to New York. Like, it's always going to be my rock and my stay state.
Yeah. That's so cool.
I love that. Okay, I feel like I kind of want to start just with the first question with you, because you're a writer and a comedian, and I'm always so curious how you people get to
what do you mean, you people? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, don't group me.
Labels. No.
Yeah, exactly. There are no types. But yeah, like just how you even get into that. So our first question is, what got you into the arts?
Yeah. It's so weird because I never thought I would get into the arts ever. So I have, I'm first gen. My mom's an immigrant from Trinidad. And so a lot of listeners who either have like immigrant parents or even like East Asian, Nigerian, South Asian, Caribbean descent probably resonate with the idea of you are either a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, or a disappointment to the family. And so I was like, okay, doctor, it's done. And by I mean my mom. And so kind of went through that path of like going through school, getting the top grade, saying, okay, I'm going to go to Harvard. I'm going to be a doctor. This is the path. It's done. And so I went down that path a considerable distance. And then I always like had music as a backing or writing as a backing, but it was always kind of like, I feel like this is something that like all those things were for the purport of getting into a good school. Like the well-roundedness was a guise just to be like, oh, well, I have a resume for other things.
Right.
So now let me do the one thing that I've been called, quote unquote, for my parents to do.
Yeah. And when did you start playing instruments? Yeah.
So, funny story. So I was, I want to say either 4 or 5, and my older brother, like got piano lessons because obviously he was on a similar path of like getting to a good college. People like piano and violin, and so piano was his. I think he also did violin, but so he was playing piano, and I found out very young I had perfect pitch. And so whenever he played a wrong note, I just like literally 4-year-old me
drive
would go,
him nuts.
like whenever he plays the wrong note.
Gosh.
We are good friends. And so so we just my parents were like, oh, we should probably get him lessons. And so
Cool.
music has always been, and even to this day, I love having it kind of as a therapeutic medium where like
Totally.
combined with that and like synesthesia, I really like see the music. And so it's really cool to like experience it in that way and have that comfort no matter what's happening in the city, what's happening with art, what's happening with my rent being due. Like I always have that escape. And so it has always been that escape function, especially since I did not think of it as a career.
Right.
Yeah. And so had that backing, but always the goal was like, okay, you got to be a doctor.
Yeah.
So I went to college and I took intro bio and I was like, yeah, we're not doing this. This ain't it.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think like to listeners who are in the medical field, I have so much respect for you, so much love for you.
Yeah.
But I also know what goes into getting to that space, and you have to be 100% convicted.
sold
like
out.
I need to be here.
Yeah.
And there, I remember like the point where it was 5 a.m. I was studying in a 24-hour library, and all my friends are drawing nucleotides for fun. I wish that were a joke. It is not a joke.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and so then the rest of college, it's so weird having like all of your life building toward one thing and then realizing, why was that my one thing?
Right.
And I could blame it on upbringing, sure. But at the same time, I think I should have taken it on myself to figure out like, oh, like, is this actually what's going to give me joy? Life is a long, long time. And if my goal is to get into a college, okay, that's 17 years down. I have a long way to go, hopefully, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, so after that, I had to figure out, okay, so I have to pick another career that won't disappoint my parents, but also give me some joy. And I liked math. That always resonated with me. I was good with numbers, I could add. And I, became a math major and like went into like finance, business. And so I told my parents, I remember the point telling my mom on Skype, like, Mom, Dad, I'm going into finance. And you would think like that's like accomplishing like fairly lucrative math major, good school. And I just remember my mom like holding back tears being like, Michael, you're throwing your life away.
Wow.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So they did not take that news well.
They did not take it well.
Did they like come around, or was it still, did it take like a long time?
I think when the first paycheck came in, they came around.
Yeah. Fair.
Yeah, and then I found out like how much taxes take out, and then I came around the other direction, and I'm like, what am I doing here? But
They'll get you.
They
will. They definitely will.
Yeah. So I after that, I studied that rest of the path, got a nice finance job out of college, moved to DC for that job, and that's when things got spicy, because that's when like
Not spicy.
spicy like picante. And do you know Jack London's Call of the Wild?
Yes.
Yeah, great
I've heard
book.
of it.
So there's this dog called Buck, very domesticated dog.
Okay.
And it goes through his like transformation from getting like abducted as a dog to being like sold and being, on this journey of like also abandoned in the woods and then found, and then that owner gets killed too. Also a lot of spoiler alerts, but it's been a book since like the early 1900s. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
So it's this dog kind of becoming this primordial beast, and it's kind of metaphorical for like self-actualization as well, of like this dog, getting in tune with its roots, its instincts, and becoming a wolf-like being that's kind of roaming free and finding its own truth. And I think that year in DC in finance was that year for me.
Wow.
Where I was, it's a very stressful place, finance.
I'd imagine.
I know it's known for how fun it is, but it's not fun. And so, like very common to have your days that are like, you get up at 6 a.m., you get into work. Sometimes you leave at like 2, 3. It's very, par for the course, a.m., not p.m. And and so very like socially dark, spiritually dark, physically dark. Every kind of bad is in there.
Yeah.
So I think I was literally like during one of my lunch breaks, just like straight up praying to God, like, hey, like, what's good? I'm not supposed to be here. Like, guide me through this. And I still say to myself, I'm a person of faith. And so like to this day, I have the same prayer of like, God, I'm going to need you to close some doors. I'm dumb. Just tell me where you need me to be.
Yeah.
I will be there. I will mess up somehow. I will find a way to do it wrong, but like,
Yeah.
make it as easy as you can for me.
Yeah,
Totally.
totally.
I will. And so, I was praying during my lunch break, got back, and got fired immediately.
Wow.
Yeah.
What?
And I asked into why, because I was their top earner, top performer. They just said, we just don't see it.
Wow.
And that was a moment from God where I was just like, wow.
You made that very clear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one, thank you. Two,
Yeah.
I have rent due on the 11th.
Yeah.
And I'm going to need help with that.
Yeah. You're like, about that prayer.
Maybe.
Could I put a caveat?
Yeah. Or like a writer bill of like, I need a condo. Like,
Right.
Or something.
Yeah.
And so later that week, this sounds straight out of a movie. It's entirely true. Later that week, I was at a bar, just like, eating my sorrows away.
Yeah.
It's weird going to a bar when I don't even drink, but I'm like, they have good bar food, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to just
Exactly.
like, I need my blood type to be mozzarella sticks by the end of this night.
Yeah.
Yeah, truly. Truly.
Yeah. And so I was at the bar. They had like an open like improv night. And so like an improv group went up and they're like, hey, we're short a couple people, or we're just looking for some people to join us. And like, how about you? And then they pointed at me and I'm like, fam, I'm trying to eat my burger.
Yeah.
And then they like won me over. The audience was like, yeah, join. And so I was like,
my
sure, I'll
gosh.
join. And I went on and they were like, you're a natural. Like, we have a rehearsal on Sunday if you want to join. And so that turned into a rehearsal. Rehearsals turned into shows. And it just all came together. All things come together.
That's how you got into comedy?
That's how, like, I wrote like a little bit recreational, like I said, like a little bit over time. That was the first time I ever done improv in my life.
Oh my gosh.
And so it just kind of clicked.
That
And
is so cool.
the funny thing is, like, depending on when this is put out, like a while back, I'll say, but it was last week for us.
Yeah.
I had a show. It was the solo show, Make the Cut, and you would not believe who was there. It was someone from that bar show.
No way.
Who was there from that night, and he was like the one who was like calling me up, and he was just like,
Gosh.
hey, do you remember me? And I think he lost a lot of weight or changed his hair or something because I didn't recognize him. And he's like, Arlington. I was like, oh my gosh, Kevin. And he was like, Michael. And we were like,
Wow.
yeah. And so like I told my friends, hey, remember when I told you like I started at some bar show in Virginia? This is the guy.
What?
Yeah.
That's
okay, this is a
insane.
movie, Michael. Like
Yeah.
this, I would watch this in a heartbeat.
Totally.
Yay.
I mean, like, truly, just the fact that you were like in a bar eating a burger and they're like, get on up here. And you're like, no. And then it's like a new path opened up.
Yeah, it really like just complete shift. And it was one of those things
Crazy.
where like I said, I've always had that like thing of like, oh, this is fun. It's not a career. And then like doing that and realizing how fun it was. I think it was also that combined with this was a job like finance. Like, yes, I came into college being a doctor or wanting to be a doctor, but like I think that intellectual horsepower, that acumen has always been something that I've geared up for. So I think of it as like that career was like 23-ish years, 22, 23 years in the making.
Right.
And even that, I didn't have job security. So why am I worrying right now about, oh, is this a stable career? When I literally worked so hard for this job, was a top performer, and still like was not enough. for that.
Right. Right.
So maybe I should just chase this thing that, one, I feel like God's put me on the path for, and two, I really enjoy.
Yeah.
And three, people are telling me I'm like pretty okay at. And so
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, let me just chase down this path, see where it goes. So the natural next step was like, oh, I should probably move to New York, because if I want to do comedy, this is the place. If I want to even do finance, this is the place. Like,
Right.
Right.
There was no fundamental reason I needed to be in Virginia at that
Yeah,
point.
totally.
So
Yeah.
I was like, we outie. And so, yeah, moved to New York. Had a good 3 months here. Pandemic happened. And
Yes,
then,
yes.
Pandemic dummy.
yeah. And then during that, though, I realized that like the right people came in my life. Because I came here, I did Upright Citizens Brigade. That's when I met all those people. Really hit it off. Which this is an important reference point. I'm very introverted. I feel uncomfortable around people most of the time. That's my default. So
Yeah.
it's very weird being in comedy right now.
Yeah,
totally.
When like, especially like these are people that like you probably imagine are the life of the party. They're
Yeah,
the class
sure.
clown growing up, and I'm just like the kid in the front who's like, if I could bring an apple to class, I would. Like,
Right.
that's
Yeah,
how-
yeah,
Totally.
I was definitely just a different trope there. And so, yeah, I found people that like made me feel at home, made me feel comfortable, made me feel seen. And they really helped me along my journey, because like it definitely, like, I still had a lot to learn. And so I learned it there. And then did some stuff with the Groundlings too in terms of sketch. And after the pandemic, just like those connections that I made, it kind of like all wove together beautifully, where like someone I met like told me to take this workshop with him. I ended up doing it. Then he saw one of the sketches that I wrote and referred it to who's now the director of UCB, or one of them. And that guy booked me for one of the biggest shows for UCB. It was called Characters Welcome. They're now an independent team. And so I performed that. And that was, I think, my first live character performance ever.
Cool. Wow, Michael.
Yeah, it was
That's so
nuts.
cool.
Yeah. And so they were like, hey, like, just a heads up, we'd like to put these on YouTube. Would you feel comfortable with that? And every fiber of my being was saying, no. I'm a doctor. What is happening?
Yeah.
And no, I'm kidding about the doctor part. That dream already died. And yeah, so I was like, okay, sure. And they put it up and it went viral. And so like a lot of more people came my direction saying like, hey, I have this gig, or hey, I have this show. And it kind of went from there, where like I started honing like my comedic voice, my styling, made my one-man show. That the show is actually like a vignette of characters. Like it's not like a like stand-up hour, for example. It's more of like, you know, oh, here's some distinct characters and then a through line. And that's actually square in the middle of it, because that's how I got my start. That character.
Cool.
But yeah, it all like I was saying with the Call of the Wild, it kind of was like this slow devolution into devolution, I'd argue evolution, into self-actualization, into the arts, and into taking my going from a point when I was in finance or even in college where I was like putting my inner child frankly on life support, to like really helping grow and nurturing it into a place where I can reconcile like this upbringing that I had of like what's worth doing is worth doing well, with at the same time saying, okay, but this is a creative thing, and so there aren't really KPIs for how you perform well in the arts. So I give myself that accountability, but at the same time, I really just like let my intrusive thoughts run free.
Yeah.
Do you find, I'm always so interested in this because I'm an introvert as well, and it is, I think, being an introvert in artistic spaces is always kind of like,
it's hard.
It is kind of hard because it's like, it can be very, very overwhelming. But I also learned that there are, like, in the spaces that I'm in, at least, there are a lot more introverts than I think there are. So somehow you kind of like find each other and like befriend one another. Do you find that in like the comedy world, that there are more than you thought there would be? Or is it pretty like, it's a lot of extroverts? I
think because I joined through introverted people, I was like, okay, there's a couple. And I just have to find those couple and I'm good. So like, I give myself guidelines whenever I go to shows. Even I tell myself I'm never going to go to a show unless I know two people for sure.
Like, in the show, or like that will
be there, like in the venue. Because if I go and there's no people, I'm just like in the corner pretending I'm on my phone looking at notifications. We all know I don't have notifications.
Right?
I don't have friends like that. And then additionally, if I go and there's one, it's like when you're at a party, right? And there's like only one person there, and you're kind of like, you know, grabbing onto their kayak and capsizing it actively.
Right.
I don't want to do that to them, right? And so I'm like, okay, two people for that very reason.
Right.
Wait, that's so true. I have 100% done that. Yeah.
But yeah, so like that, for example, helps me a lot to safeguard. And then also I just like hanging with comedians also one-on-one. I'll be like, hey, like let's grab lunch. Let's like hang out. Let's write together. And a lot of them are very open to that. And so we'll just do that. We'll kick it. We'll talk about life. I love just asking people like, what's your dream? Where are you going? Like, what's your plan with all this? And because it's like, I don't know if y'all experience this too, but like it's weird, but you do have to kind of determine a little bit like who's your coworker and who's your friend.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because, and it's not so much of like a guarding your heart thing as much as it like is about like being like considering where you're putting your energy and your time and who you're pouring into. And I like to pour into everyone I encounter, but I also am aware that like I stretch myself thin very often, and so I have to safeguard that.
Yeah, that's so true. I also feel like it's I don't know if it's an age thing or an experience thing, but I've definitely been feeling that more so in the past like year or two. And I have that conversation more frequently with people in the arts that are kind of like, because the lines can get kind of blurry, which isn't necessarily a bad thing always. But when you're talking about like your own like energy and your own, just like, the amount of, time that you have too. Like it does matter to kind of like know who your people are and who they are to you and to each other. Anyway, it always sounds so like strange to me in my head, like saying that, but it is true. And you just have to think about it.
Yeah. Well, we encounter people all the time.
Yeah.
We live in the it feels like the most populated
We live
city in the world.
society.
Yeah. But like even what we do as artists, we encounter other artists all the time.
Yeah.
And so being able to be like, differentiate, like, oh, I want to collaborate with this person. I feel inspired when they talk to me about what they want to do. I want to work on what they're working on. Or, oh, this person knows me very well. We click. We're really good friends. Or, oh, I know, everybody starts to become pseudo categorized in your head, for lack of a better term. And I think that is like, if you're doing it well, I think it's very beneficial. If it starts to become, it can start to become like, I think a fear that people have with that is like, if you compartmentalize, then you're only going to certain people for certain things rather than creating an environment where all of your people get to come together and, flourish.
And I mean, I think intuitively it's very antithetical just to the career of comedy of like making other people like you and making other people happy to see you. And I'm very fortunate because that's something I really struggled with growing up, especially like being first gen, being one of the few brown people on Long Island. Like it very much was, and this, like, some of it's external, a lot of it's internal of like, oh, I need to get people to like me. I need to basically placate to whatever they want to see in me and be that. And so I'm very glad that I found that or discovered that part of myself and was aware of it and catered to it properly before going into comedy. Because I know a lot of people where that's very hard for them. They struggle with like adequately pouring themselves into people and making people like them, but also leaving room for themselves.
Right. Yeah, it is definitely like and this is something I was talking with a coworker about yesterday, is like, if you put all of your life proverbial eggs, all of your being into the people like me basket, as soon as one person comes up and doesn't give you the job or doesn't say the right thing or offends you or whatever it might be, all of a sudden all of those eggs get dropped and you're
or accidentally become hard boiled.
Yeah, or they bounce like the ones that Rach made on
literally. Probably.
Boing? No, but it does get to the point where it's like you simply cannot put all of yourself into this art. You just can't do it because eventually it will disappoint you. It will. It'll people will disappoint you. The art will disappoint you. But it is something to be cared for.
Definitely.
And paid attention to. So there is this like balance of like, how do you put yourself out there and yet not put all of your very hard boiled eggs in that one basket.
Do you find that like, because your story is so interesting and it's very like a lot of things in the arts, it just kind of sounds like, oh, this happened and then this door opened and then this door opened. Are in like the comedy world and the writing world too, are there like ways that you know of that are kind of like the typical way to get to a certain point, or is it pretty like
the entry points?
Yeah. Or is everybody like, no, it's pretty different for each person?
I'd say the entries, like, it's usually one of a couple paths. Like, either you did like sketch or improv or studied screenwriting in college, or you just get into stand up and you do a bunch of open mics in maybe a smaller city and then you move to New York. Usually by New York, people have their stuff together. They've been honing it for a while. They usually are from some smaller city, or maybe like not even a smaller city, but like, like it's maybe a town or like a city that's like, maybe like, I know Dallas, I think, has a really good scene. Philadelphia, also a really great scene. Baltimore. And so then they come to New York. And then because a lot of the writers' jobs are either here or LA.
Yeah.
Some of them now, it's very common to just start on YouTube or just start on TikTok and just start putting content out.
Wow. Yeah.
And there's always a weird thing of like, especially comedy in the internet and the content space has a very wide meaning.
Yeah.
But it's always interesting to see though, like for me, the litmus test has always been like, okay, can they hold this live? Because there are some people where they do like TikToks and they're funny, and then you see them live and it's like, oh, this holds up. They're very, very talented. They know how to write a joke. They know how to keep an audience. And then there are other situations.
That is not the case.
Yeah. And it could be that they're just really good at that medium, but a lot of the times it might just be like, oh, it's in the name of virality. It's in the same name of scalable content. Like, Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. I've never thought, I mean, there's like a couple people that I follow on Instagram just because I'm like, oh my gosh, these characters are hilarious. Like Corporate Natalie. I don't know if you know Corporate Natalie, but she makes me laugh so hard. But like there are those people where I'm like, oh yeah, I wonder if they're this funny in real life. I don't know.
Yeah. And it's very common in like industry rooms or in auditions or in showcases where you have like a half and half where like half of them, like half of the like lineup is like TikTok famous or like has a big following. And then the other half is like scene comics, like they've done the New York circuit and that kind of thing. And it's very strange. Like you can never tell which ones of the like, unless you've seen them before. It's hard to tell like which ones of the like internet famous ones will hold up or not. Some like it's very surprising because some of them crush it, and then you're like, wow, like they can do both. It's really cool.
Yeah. It's like a whole world that's been opened up too. Different avenues.
Well, I mean, you can be, you know, I in thinking about like the development of comedy over like the internet, first we just had SNL and like sketch comedy as like the only avenue for you to like put out comedy and widespread other than like doing stand-up shows, right? And then those started to get filmed, and then all of a sudden Joe Schmo in his basement can be a comedian, you know, and put out something on the same platform as like, you know, any other really famous comedian. And so it's a very like, it gives a lot of people more access to be able to flex that muscle. Because I do think what you do as a comedian is so difficult. As an actor, I look at comedians and I'm like, oh my gosh. People will be like, what do you think is harder, drama or comedy? And I'm like, 100,000% comedy. Because it takes so much skill to be able to hold an audience and keep an audience. And so if you're not a good actor, if you can't tell stories well, if you can't engage an audience, it's really hard. But in 10 seconds on TikTok, you know, or a minute on TikTok, like anybody can be pretty funny, you know? So it is kind of interesting to see, like, hear you say, oh, some of these people are incredible and some of them just like can't hold it.
And I mean, the part of it is like you were saying, I'll be like the traditional media like route from, I'd say the early 50s, 60s, and then obviously with Johnny Carson, who was the former host of like the Tonight Show before it was given to like Leno, Conan, Leno again, Fallon. That was the thing. Like it was, you do stand up like in, let's say your New York clubs. Johnny Carson notices you, puts you on the show, and then you become the next Seinfeld, Ellen DeGeneres, Eddie Murphy. Even up to the 90s, it was you get your own show, Kevin James, Ray Romano, right? And so now it's so decentralized, and there really isn't that test because it's 10-second like bits sometimes, or it's hard to like determine, oh, can this hold in a traditional media setting? Can I give them a TV show? Like, would this kind of humor hold up? There are some situations where it absolutely does, and then a lot where it doesn't. And it's really hard to tell, and that's why usually for industry showcases, they'll never bring someone straight through. They'll still like have a live audition. It's very common.
Oh yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I never thought about, or I just didn't think about how that was so common to have like your own show, and there's nothing like that right now.
I think the closest we have, or the last recent example I could think of, is 2019. Rami Youssef had an HBO stand-up special called, I think it was called Feelings, I want to say. Okay. And then they gave him like a like his own show. Oh. I think it was on FX. I could be wrong on that. It's either FX or Hulu. But then like it was just a show about him being Egyptian, living in America. I resonate a lot with that show just because it's also someone who was brown in New York during 9/11 and going with that. Yeah. But yeah, it's really cool to see like that pipeline still is there.
It exists still,
albeit
yeah.
like there are a lot of other pipelines and ways to the top, which is really cool.
Yeah.
I think though, for me, I always am like, what happens will happen, and the pathway I need to take will be there.
Yeah.
I'm not too worried about how other people are getting there.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
And that's good, as you should feel. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, then should we go on to question 2?
Yeah.
Because this pseudo goes into what you just said. Sorry, I'm going to my notes. So why do you think the arts are important?
Yeah, I think they're important just because humanity is important. Like, because it's a window into people. Like, it is empathy incarnate, right? Like, and like this goes to like every text we've read, every song we've ever heard. Like, it does, like, either it is an opportunity to look inward, like the creator is looking inward,
Right.
Given their creation. It's could be that, it could be, or it could be like their own internal proclamation. So the Psalms are a great example of that.
Sure.
It could be just for the beauty and to illustrate something to the audience. So that's your Song of Solomon. Or it could be like, you know, just to show your audience. And like I was saying in the bio, like, you know, connecting with them or convicting them. Or I was in this humor publication in college, and we had this oath we would do during initiation. And that is that we promised to always comfort the afflicted and afflict the comforted. And yeah. And at first I thought, I was like, oh, this is one of those antithesis phrases where you just reverse the words and it's supposed to sound profound. But then I actually thought of it and I was like, oh, this is actually pretty insightful and valuable.
Yeah.
Yep.
And yeah, it was really cool to be like, oh, like comedy can serve a purpose more than this. And this is like your storytelling. This is your daily shows. This is like things where it's like, okay, like we have comedy and we're going to use this as a vehicle to say, okay, this is a window into how I perceive and how I see the world.
Right.
And hopefully I could make it palatable for you. And so the character that I was talking about before of like, this is the one that like went viral, was my break. Yeah. Hopefully one of many. And it was, I'll explain it because jokes are best explained. It was basically, I think that if you find it on YouTube, it's called Teacher Has a Token White Student. And it's basically a reversal.
We'll put this
on,
in the show notes.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
We'll link it.
It's basically a reversal on like a teacher exoticizing their student who's a minority. And so it's saying, oh, Dylan, sorry, there are not like a lot of white teachers here, or like a lot of white people. You are welcome here. And, you know, just a heads up, we'll take a month to learn about White History Month. But like, if you want to give a part of your culture or something, or like, I'll be like, hey, just a heads up, there is a final set the May 29th, there is a final set the day of May 29th. Dylan, I won't get ahead of you this one. That is the day the farmer's market opens. So like, I'm sorry if you like observe that day. Like, I don't know if your culture, if that's a holiday, but you could bring it up with the school board. Yeah, so it's kind of a reversal on that. But I love that. Awesome. I made a promise to myself now to no longer read comments, but at that time I didn't make that promise. And so I read through.
Yeah.
And a lot of the comments were like, oh, I get it now. Or it was people sharing their story of like how that resonates with them, of like being like, hey, like I was the only Asian person in my class and this is what I dealt with, or I was the only like Hispanic person, this is how I dealt, or even like I was the only white person in an international school and this is how it resonates with me. And so it was cool not only to see like the myriad of experiences that resonates with, but also the people that like this was so foreign to them, and people that were like, I'm white, I've never noticed this before.
Wow.
And then some people were like, this is not a thing. And then like comments saying like, I would disagree, this is what I went through. And so, and sometimes that discourse is the parameters of a YouTube comment thread. You would expect it to be not the best.
Sure. Yeah.
Not the most intellectual debate, but it was, I think that just having that discourse is really cool. Just to be like, oh, like there is going to be a dialogue that's had from this of like, how do I perceive this? What do I perceive? What don't I see? And like hearing those experiences from other people. And so, yeah, I really think the arts are like one of the best ways to like show that window into other people. And that's not to say like the sciences, like I grew up, you know, science, math was my life. And so, and I do think creativity is in anything. I definitely do. I think for me, at least the parameters I've set for myself on introspection is like, if it's something, it has to have both. It has to be internally novel. Let me think about this right. It has to be internally novel where it's like you feel like you're putting your own creativity and your own thing into it. It shouldn't be like if it's a TikTok part 2 and you're not putting any additional energy into it. And then also it has to be externally signature. Like I have to be like, oh, this is something I can identify from this person. And that's why you see when someone is, doing the TikTok green screen effect and pointing at someone else's tweet, like I would argue that's not their creativity being utilized. Or some people might. Those are just the definitions I've set for myself.
Yeah.
People could disagree. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
But I do think about that a lot of like when I'm making something of like, okay, this is like taking from myself, but also people like, and of my individuality, and also can be recognized as my individual voice.
Right.
And
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
How did you come to create or identify, maybe is a better way to say it, identify your personal style within comedy? Because you are taking, there are very set things as far as comedy goes, improv, stand-up, sketch, right? And those things have variations on them depending upon how you do them, things like that. But how did you feel like you achieved those two things within like identifying your style of comedy?
I forget who it was. I think it was a writer for Seth Meyers who said they would write like sample monologue jokes in the styles of, or sample monologues from every host in their style.
Wow.
And then they see the through lines of like, oh, I always write this way, or I use this kind of joke no matter what. That's unique to me.
Yeah.
And so like, it's important to have a general, it's important to have a general well-roundedness. And to, especially like, cause you often have to like write for a show or write for an Emmy monologue or something. And so like, it's important if you're going for late night to be like, okay, I know how to write in the style of Jimmy Fallon. Like he's not going to do political jokes. He's going to keep it like more lighthearted with the jokes, a lot of wordplay. Whereas Colbert will probably do an impression of like Trump or Biden or whoever. Daily Show, like you are now writing for a host that's not white. You could have some fun.
Sure. Yeah.
And then, but also it's good to be aware through all of that. My through line is also like seeing my own jokes and my own style. A comedy friend told me that the way he's defined my style or how he perceives it is if Trevor Noah let the intrusive thoughts win. Which I think is very true because I do a lot of political commentary, but I also have like a very dark, jaded style with how I write. Which comes from a very dark, jaded place. Now I'd say I'm better, but at that time, and I just kept the style. It just worked for me.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I write for like a monologue packet, and I have a joke that's like so good, and it's like I'll give an example of a joke that I wrote for a packet, and someone was like, "This is one of the funniest jokes I've ever read," and it was this was with U.S. News about one of the drones taking out one of the top Syrian generals, which it was perceived at the time as a threat, and so I wrote a joke that was like. Trevor Noah, but let the intrusive thoughts win. In a nutshell. If we need to censor this part of the podcast, that is totally okay.
I'm like,
that's awesome.
We could like pixelate the joke.
Yeah.
I just have the laughs at the end.
We'll bleep it out. Yeah. Can you imagine?
It's like when people on a video sing Beatles songs or something.
Right.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with that. But just to say to the point of like. So I wrote that, and I had a deadline around the corner for writing a packet for James Corden. And obviously, y'all could imagine, there's no timeline where he says that joke.
Yeah.
Right.
There's no, he will be in Cats 2 before he says that.
Right. Oh, gosh.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
He'll be in Cats 2.
Woof. You had to bring up Cats.
Not woof,
meow.
But,
Yeah. Meow is correct.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's like you have to know like which voice to write for. And so it's good to have that general well-roundedness, but also specialize in what makes you you. Because at the same time, the goal is maybe for one to become their own late night host or to have their own stand-up specials or whatever. And so you need to know, okay, what are you drawn to in terms of joke writing? What do you find funny? Because I've seen people try to do an alt style or a different style that's not theirs, but they find very formulaically pleasing and like this gets reps, I will do it. And then they do it and it feels like not inauthentic, that's not the right word, but like kind of just like
Calculated?
Put on and calculate. Yeah, that's the word.
Yeah.
So it's just like, okay, they are doing this as a choice. This doesn't necessarily resonate with them, and it shows in the performance of it as well.
Yeah, that's so interesting because I guess in some senses it does. There is a lot of calculating that happens when you're writing jokes, but you can't let it show.
Yeah, no. I think the best stand-ups, at least that I've seen, are the ones that have it all calculated in their head, but you can never tell because
Never
like
tell.
good stand up feels off the cuff,
Right,
no matter
yeah.
what.
Yep.
And then you're like, oh, I love how they like just thought of that bit. It's like, no, they wrote
They
that bit
they know
before.
it. Yeah.
Even crowd work's a great example. That always goes viral on TikTok now. Like stand up crowd work, which is that's a whole other behemoth of a weird scenario. It's fine. It's just so funny to me the fact of like they spent all this time writing this material and their break ends up being them like riffing with an audience member on the cuff, off the cuff. Like
and truly just like most of the time roasting this audience member.
And there's some like I will say there's some that like are so good, and then I'll say there are like 95% of them that are literally just like, so what do you do for work? I'm in sales. Oh, what do you like? You're a salesperson. You sell things. That's unusual. Look at this weird boy.
Yeah.
Sell me this pencil. Haha, Wolf of Wall Street. Like it's just the most like. Oh,
And
okay.
everybody's like,
5 million views.
exactly.
Yeah. But I just find it funny that, and that's not to knock that, just to say it's funny because they do spend all this time outside of it writing material that ends up not getting the break. And they're
Totally.
like,
Right.
yeah. But it's a time.
It's a time.
I think it's so cool that you bring up the window into that person, because what you just described and like your own personal style and how you develop that really shows a window into who you are and like what kind of person you are and how you function within this world. And I think that is like, you bring up, the comments on your video on YouTube. That is, it allows, I think, for maybe the window for, to use another metaphor, displaying yourself through the window of comedy allows for other people to maybe open their window a little bit and allow for conversation where there might not have been a conversation before, and so it's so cool that something that will make you laugh, I think immediately, at least it does for me, brings down my walls. And I see that happen in so many other people where it's like, oh, that's really funny. And then I think about it more later. I'm like, oh, wait, that was actually really deep, or that really impacted me.
Comedy is a great avenue to expose truth that like
it is
needs to be exposed, or just like, or it's very disarming.
Very.
Yeah. So it's like, it's a very disarming way to expose truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there are jokes where like you laugh and then you think about it, and then there are jokes where you like are like, oh, like you
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay, I think we need to keep on keeping on.
I know. Such an interesting conversation.
It really is. Okay, Michael, what keeps you grounded as a human?
What keeps me grounded? Rent being due, probably.
Yeah.
I honestly
always humbling.
I don't think. Yeah, I don't think I've really had that issue. For me, it's always actually been the converse. What has kept me ungrounded? Like because like my default's been the ground. Like because I've been in such a analytical career, like coming up, and so that's never been really my issue. I've always been very, I'd say, calculating and very kind of self-aware of like where I am, where I'm going, how do I get there?
Yeah.
And so, I think I've kind of just been grounded just by virtue of that. I think what's kept me ungrounded is just the company I keep, being around people that are very, that you could just like riff off. You could have that easy energy and not worry about like how they perceive you, how they view you.
Yeah.
Especially like you can imagine in prior careers, like that are very analytical, very quantitative. It's very easy to feel like you're on a tightrope with people, and very much like I have to watch exactly what I say, because the corporate environment be political sometimes. You know?
Definitely.
And that's not to say like the real world isn't. It absolutely is, but I think it's just about finding that company and finding the people that you could share your heart with and not worry about how it's perceived or how it's interpreted. But like that, those are like, find your group that like sees your intent as well as your impact, and can see sometimes past your impact, so that, they could see where you're coming from. Because, and it's even advice with just like joke writing or probably any creative outlet of like finding people that aren't just like, oh, this is not good, but also could see the second layer of like, you don't have to take their advice or feedback quantitatively of like, I need to do this exact change to my pilot script, but it might just be like them saying, okay, I see what you're going for here.
Right.
Especially coming up from like UCB or the Groundlings, like I think probably in drama and like other spaces,
Yeah.
this is a common thing. I'd say there are two types of teachers. There, especially when providing feedback. There is the one type where it's the teacher who sees, let's say, your script or your sketch or whatever, and they say, "This is good. Let's make this let's make the best possible thing, though.
Right.
Let's make it as good as possible." And then there's the second type of teacher, and that's the teacher that says, "Okay, this script is good. I see exactly what you're going for. Let's max out in that direction." So it's like almost a V best versus your best.
Right.
And I know some people like feel one way or the other. I lean way more to the latter. I think that, especially when you have to think about your voice, your style, and especially for a lot of things, I have to end up performing it.
Right.
I think about what is true to me, what is true to my style, what is true to like, what do I want, like, let's say a Netflix exec to read, and like, how do I want them to perceive me as well, as a creator, as a writer.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so interesting because as like actors, we think about going into the room and it's not booking the role. It's just booking the room. Like it's making sure they get a sense of who you are, not necessarily who you are in this role, like at least for an initial audition. So it's kind of interesting that across the board, like what you're saying right now is like, it's basically the same way of like, you just want them to get a sense for like who you are. And
I have a lot of performer auditions where people are like, "Oh, the judges like this, do this." And I'm like, yeah, but it will feel forced. It will look forced.
Right.
Like, then that will,
you can't cater to everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or else like, who are you?
Yeah. But I think, you have to cater to yourself first in the room and like show them, "Oh, this is what you're getting into."
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Just a sad boy.
This is what you're getting into.
Just a sad boy trying to pay rent.
Yeah, literally. Yeah.
Exactly. Always comes back to rent.
Always comes back to
Always.
rent. Great musical, terrible financial obligation.
Truly. I mean, say that.
Real. Okay, Michael, question number 4 is what person, place, or experience has shaped you the most creatively?
I think they've always been non-creative things that have shaped
That's
me.
great.
So like
That's awesome.
that 1 week that I mentioned before of like losing the finance job, getting into improv, getting that first improv rehearsal up and going, like that week was so like just shattering in a good way.
Yeah.
Or it's just like, obviously a big part of that was I was in a career that's like white collar, take yourself very seriously. And then after that, I'm literally making hee-hees for drink tickets. Like,
right.
It's so different. Where it's like, you only like, the win scenario in one is to be as buttoned up and as professional, and the win scenario in the other is to just be silly and be yourself and show that part to people.
Yeah.
Whereas the other one, that will get you fired immediately.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was very formative. I think the other one, again, they're not really inherently creative. I think a lot of mine that would be fueling me creatively are ones that are affirming, "Oh, you can do this. Oh, this is a career. Oh, this makes sense for you." And so two that come to mind immediately. One is, so my mom's from Trinidad. That whole side of the family still lives there. And we were WhatsApp calling them one time. And I remember chatting with my cousin because they saw the YouTube video of that character. And I remember chatting with them and they're like, "This is really funny." And then I remember my cousin saying like, "I'm really glad someone in the family is like going for a creative career."
Wow.
Like just glad someone's doing it, because it's like, I don't want to make a larger thing of like reading into what he said, but at least this is how I read into it of like, there's just so much like, there's just a system that's not made for us. It's made for like, there are people that are able to get the better end of them vis-a-vis society. And then there's more likely the latter, which is like, okay, we are imaginative, creative, analytically sharp individuals as we grow up, and then we are chiseled away until we are just a shell that's holding up a societal end. That's capitalism for you. I mean, that's other constructs. That's not just capitalism. But beyond that, I was like, okay, like I was halfway down that path, and then I switched, and I think that moment talking with my cousin really hit home of like, oh wait, like this is like me getting out.
Yeah.
And I do truly perceive it that way of like, like I'd like to think I have a break, but even if I don't, of like, at least I'm trying for it, because I've seen the family, like the generations, not try. And be in careers that they like either were passionate about or very analytical, but also still serving a societal end and feeling like they had to mute themselves, or that they're even worse, not passionate about it, and that it's even more muted because then their passions are muted.
Right.
I'm a huge proponent of like where God calls us should be the nexus of our experiences, our passions, and our skill sets. And so I think by virtue, it's not always going to be a creative career for everyone, but it should always involve creativity for everyone. Because if it doesn't, then you're not using your passion. Right. Like, because then there's no you in it. Right. And so,
that's good, Michael.
I know.
That's dropping heat. And so I'm very fortunate that for me, I found that thing. Yeah. Not that it's like before it's too late. I don't think there's a too late, but I also think like, I'm also very fortunate because I do, like I said, I'm a huge proponent of faith, and I'm a huge proponent of these, like what happens happening for a reason. Yeah. And so to that end, I'm very fortunate that, that I had those experiences that I know almost are functionally a Chekhov gun, that they haven't been used yet, but that like I know down the line, these are going to come in handy. So, I mean, I don't think it's a stretch for one to imagine how having a business background would be useful in the creative world.
100%.
But I just know that those things, like even the hedge fund life, I literally, right now I'm writing out a new pilot spec about that, or pilot script around like my time there and like that experience. And so it's really cool to be like, oh, this is an opportunity for me to offer an audience a window into the ultra rich. Right. And like what it's like for someone from an economically disadvantaged background being around people that are like, what do you mean you haven't had Ethiopian food before? Like, it's a very common thing. For the readers, it is very good. Yeah, like it was really cool to be like, okay, I've had this experience, and this is how like I can now fuel it into a creative thing, and this is how like now I'm in a space where I could use everything that like has fed into my life to this point. The influences, the experiences, the passions, the skills, and be like, okay, this is like, are y'all familiar with the concept of embodiment? Yes. Like the idea that like we as humans should work to converge our outer self with our inner self, like how people perceive us with how we are internally. And I think that like, as we mute those things, it becomes harder. So the fact that I'm able to use those passions, those experiences, those skills, I think it brings me to that point of like self-actualization, to actualization of purpose and calling from God, to actualization of who I could be for the people around me.
Yeah. Oh, so good.
Michael, you are dropping some good nuggets in this podcast.
I'm going to have to go back and when I listen, take notes.
You're also going to have to edit out a lot of ums. I have been
we're all culprits
Lots of
that.
ums and
Don't
likes
even
and
worry about
and,
it.
Yeah.
Okay, our very last question is, what book, play, or film do you think every person should read or watch? It can be outside of that too.
The Bible. No. I think two books that helped me. I will not say these will help other people, but they helped me a lot. Yeah. Because they are in this they're very, I'd say, fairly humanist, but also like self-help vein.
Hey,
which
listen.
Not for everyone. I enjoyed them. One of them this was when I was switching. I think it was in that week or the month after. I read this book called Milking the Pigeon. It's by Alexander Heine, I want to say, Heyne. I don't know if it's Heine or Heine, but it was basically like, I think the subtitle is like making the most of your 20s or something. But I do not think it's proprietary to 20s. I think the idea that he's working to capture is just when you're in a pivotal part of your life where you're trying to figure out who you are and where you need to go and how do I get there. Yeah. And there's just a lot of really good knowledge nuggets in there about like, oh, there's no true roadmap. And especially in a creative career, there's absolutely no roadmap. Yeah. And so it's so funny being on talks or hearing people interviewed being like, hey, how do I break in? How do I do this? And as if there was just going to be one unique answer of, oh, you bring
go
like
under
this
the bridge.
You go under the bridge, you give this to the post office, and then they give you your writer job.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there are so many ways, and you could learn like, and this is not to say that's a bad question. You could still learn from other people's experiences. That being said, it's really just going to be whatever's true to you. And, whatever path you find, one, available, two, that resonates with you and your thing. Because I know for a fact that like there are a lot of people that go through the internet famous route where they are like, I will just make a bunch of videos on TikTok And I get anxiety from that kind of thing. That I'm very perfectionist,
Totally.
so I do not feel comfortable putting on social media. At least now, this might change in the future, but for now, that kind of gives me a level of like, oh, like I feel very exposed right now.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Whereas doing that in a basement for 20 people, I feel very fine with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that epiphany of like, oh, there's no roadmap, find whatever resonates with you. And there's a lot of other great stuff about finding out what is your passion. Another great book on that front, I think his name's Larry Smith. He has a middle initial that he uses. But
Larry, it's hard to remember.
Yeah, I think it's a W. Larry Smith, he's a professor, I believe University of Toronto. And it's called No Fears, No Excuses. And it's basically, I love that it's so just universal. It does not matter if it's for a creative career. It does not matter if it's for an analytical career.
Yeah.
It says regardless, you have to figure out your passions. And your passions can be in an analytical thing. It could be in a not inherently creative career, but it should still leverage your creativity. So the first half of the book is about like finding what that thing is and saying, here's how you properly prepare for it. And it should not be something that's like, oh, this is a spark of the moment interest thing,
Sure.
but it's also not something where you're so passionate that you go in over your head and don't actually do the homework on it.
Yeah.
Because believe you me, I know a lot of comedians, as you can imagine, are going in and not doing the proper homework, and
Sure.
they have that classic cone energy, and that's very funny. But then they have their second mic or the second show, and they need new material, and then it's hard for them to rally their work ethic and put that together.
Yeah.
So that's the first half of the book. The second half of the book is the actualization and the realization of those goals and saying, okay, this is how we quantify it. This is how we make this happen.
Yeah.
And these really great resources in that book just to say like, oh, you should reach out to people. You should do these things. And speaking of like goal, this is one that just comes up right now to me. One about finding meaning of life and for goals. Even if you're not someone of faith, I love this book. It's actually not one of faith, but it's about Viktor E. Frankl was in the Holocaust. It was a survivor. And he wrote this book, Man's Search for Meaning.
Yes.
And that's such a good book of like, just even outside of like thinking of the larger purpose, just thinking about how do I make this tangible for me today? How do I make smaller goals for me to actualize so that it doesn't become something I procrastinate. It doesn't become something I'm anxious about. It just becomes a thing on Google Maps where I have to do all these turns first before I get there.
Right. Totally.
And yeah, I'd say like those three really resonate with me. In terms of like artistic things I think everyone should watch, the Bee Movie's pretty good. I enjoy it.
I kind of saw the smile before the joke, and I was like, what's it gonna
You're
be?
like, oh, no.
Could not have guessed that one.
No, this is what LB was saying before about like the drama and the comedy coming together, because there is some drama of it of like, if I really wanted to sell that joke properly, I should have kept a straight face the whole time, and I could not.
I can't tell you though what brings me, what joy it brings me to like see people find themselves funny before.
Tell about your dad. Tell what
Oh
he does.
yeah, my dad, I love. Like if I look at him, I know, and he's got like a kind of like a little smirk on his face. I'm like, oh boy,
Oh no.
Todd's gonna drop a joke.
But yeah, so like I feel like just there are a lot of creative works that like, I don't know, it's just hard to pick like one, like, because I love, the thing is, and this is something I really look up, people I really look up to are people like Don Glover and Jordan Peele, people that are like outside the medium of like, because for me the fun part of comedy, my favorite part at least, is the puzzle of being like, oh, is this better as a sketch, is this better as a comedic music video, is this better as a stand-up joke, an improv set, right? And then but I love that or even a short humor piece. And then there are those people that could zoom out beyond that. Like Don Glover's like, is this better as a music video? Is this better as a rap? Is this better as a spoken word?
Right.
And that, I think that's my longer goal. Is like, yes, my short terms are like, I would love to be on late night. I like to be on these shows. I'd like to write my own show. But then I want the puzzle to expand to beyond medium. And so because I have that music background, those kinds of things, those are things I just really enjoy, of like being like, oh, like the medium doesn't matter. I just want people to feel, and I want the best, like I want to, there's that destination. I don't want to be forced to use this bridge if there's a better route.
Right.
Well, I mean,
Oh,
you
it's
have
so
that
good.
perfectly written in the very final sentence.
Can you read it again?
So yeah, creatively, the medium isn't a constraint. Michael just loves using art to connect, comfort, and convict as the moment calls. I love that, as the moment calls.
I love it.
It's just so good.
Well, I'm not going to convict every moment. Like,
Yeah, gee, that would be a time.
I'm just like doing my
wouldn't it?
stand-up set, and I'm like, yeah. So what else? I'm going to leave you with this. Y'all are sinners. Repent. Like,
And then just drop the mic and go. That's how it works, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh, Michael, this has been such a crazy good conversation. Thank you for being on our podcast and just chatting with us. But before we sign off, your Make the Cut is just kind of, it's gonna keep coming back.
Yeah,
right?
we've had a soft close, but so it's
Okay.
like for the foreseeable future. But I am working on my new solo show right now, just writing it. It's about kind of the purgatory I live in of being like a Long Island New Yorker now, being biracial, being like in this place where I'm not X enough, but also racially ambiguous, where like we were talking about literally on the train here, people were like a group of people said, "Hey, are you Jewish?" Like out of like solidarity. I'm like, "I'm sorry, fam, I'm not."
Yeah.
Or like literally 2 weeks ago, someone was asking me for directions in Spanish, and to the viewers listening, I'm not Hispanic. And so, just kind of living in this, societal purgatory on so many levels.
Yeah.
So I'm working on that show right now. It's still in writing, but yeah, I currently have that show, Make the Cut. It's around high school imposter syndrome. It's an hour-long time of guffaws, chortles, and tee-hees.
I love teas.
Yeah, I know. Okay, so where can we find you on socials so that we can follow along, make sure we don't miss anything?
Yeah. So you could find me at michaelsanky.com is my website. You could also find me. And also there's a crossword on the website if you just want to have fun. Like I write crosswords for fun in the free time I don't have. So just check that out. It's a good time. And then I also have Instagram. It's I was like, is it called X? And I was like, nope, wrong one. And,
Instagram.
Yeah, Instagram. It's at Michael Sanky, Michael, Sank like the Titanic, and then a Y. Yeah.
Okay. That is the best guidance for a last name spelling I've ever heard in my life.
That was amazing.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay, yeah. If you're in NYC, give Michael a follow. Don't want to miss his next show. I am praying that I'm in town for the next one because I keep being out of town. Like every time Michael has a show and I'm like, oh my gosh.
I know. We were at a wedding.
Becoming its own comedic bit.
We were at a wedding this past week when Michael had his show, and literally all of us that were on the trip were like, Michael's show is this week. We're like, no, man. Yeah, but we'll catch the next one. Hopefully we'll see you guys there.
Yes.
All of our gentle listeners. You don't want to miss Michael and all the amazing things he's doing. Buddy, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We really appreciate it. You guys, we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the For the Makers podcast. To find out more about Seated Productions, you can visit our website at www.seatedproductions.com and follow us on Instagram at seated.productions. And if you love what we do and want to support us, you can make a tax-deductible donation by visiting our website or by following the link in our podcast description. Until next time, listen well and tell stories.